Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film, and we just keep inching closer and closer to the end of 2024. And this what's going to wind up being an 80-week journey is almost over. And one of my frequent collaborators is here for the last time on this journey of Ford, and that's my buddy Foster. Foster, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me again. I feel like this is my 500th John Ford movie. It feels like this has been going on for centuries.
It hasn't, but it feels that way. I can attest. But we're going to be talking about Sergeant Rutledge for this particular episode. But if you haven't tuned in before, we have three segments. We do have coming attractions for November 15th. It's not looking like the most interesting week in November for movies, but you will talk about it anyway. Then we have our feature film, and then we have some recommendations for you. So, for this weekend, the big red elephant in the room is Red One, starring The Rock and Chris Evans and J.K. Simmons as Swole Santa. And this is an Amazon MGM film that cost $253 million, and I'm sure it'll make its budget back. But Foster, what are you most interested in checking out that happens to be on streaming?
Yes, this is one. Some people have seen this already in theaters, I'm sure, but Emilia Perez comes on Netflix November 13th. I don't know a ton about this other than the basic premise, which seems like it's a crime story where the crime boss retires and then, transitions genders, so it's like kind of a wild story. But Zoe Saldana is in it, and I think is supposed to be really good in it. And it's just going to be like a big Oscars player, so I always got to see all of those ones. And I'm looking forward to it. I don't really care like what a movie is about or what the plot is, as long as it has like a good reputation. I just want to see a good story, and it seems like that's what this is going to be.
Yeah, I don't know. I probably knew just as much as you did
Yeah.
about basic plot and some of the stars of it. And Netflix seems to be trying to be a huge player for the Oscars this year because I feel like every other week through the rest of the year, they're releasing something on their platform
Hmm.
that's going. Because, like, you have like the piano lesson that's going to be coming out too.
Yeah.
I'm sure they're going to be shooting for like they want to win an Oscar for animated feature with Spellbound
Hmm.
coming out. Doubt it. But they're really shooting for the stars, and this seems like a big one. Honestly, the rest of the releases outside of Red One and a new anime coming out, which we get anime sprinkled in probably close to every other weekend, to be honest. But this is the first one that's like actually showing like first showing that
Hmm.
they're highlighting it's coming out. But I'm big on documentaries, and there's a new Elton John Never Too Late documentary that's coming out in theaters this weekend, but it will be on Disney Plus, if I'm not mistaken, December 13th or somewhere around there. So
Hmm.
they're not going to be showing this in a theater near me, so I will be watching on Disney Plus in December. Um, but I'm a huge Elton John fan. I love music documentaries, and especially at this point where he's retired, it's going to be interesting to see. It's so interesting that this is a Disney film following up with like they aired his big LA concert from Dodger Stadium. So Elton John getting that mouse money. And I'll be looking forward to checking out the documentary when it comes out. But I am actually very interested for this particular discussion of Sergeant Rutledge because, to be honest, I kind of resigned myself to the fact that I was in the twilight years of John Ford's career where I don't know how many of these are really his strong efforts anymore. And then I watched this one, I'm like, this is considerably better than anything that I've watched in weeks. But giving some background, we have Sergeant Rutledge, released from 1960, a respected black cavalry sergeant, Brax Rutledge, which also like that's some A+ character naming.
Hmm.
Brax Rutledge stands court martial for raping and killing a white woman and murdering her father, his superior officer. And giving some background here, this is shot in beautiful, beautiful Technicolor, starring Jeffrey Hunter, who was one of the rising stars in John Ford's films in the 50s, who was set to be the big star of Star Trek before he tragically passed away. And Woody Strode, who was one of the few big black actors of the time, starring in Spartacus and this. Um, the novelization of this film actually came out the same year that the film did. One of the first films to confront racism in a frank manner and give a starring role to a black actor, which seems so weird that John Ford was that to do that. I have a hard read on him because some of his earlier films were so outwardly racist. And then it's like, and then he's making films like this.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll talk about that. But this is about a soldier from the Buffalo Soldiers Regiment, which was a very famous part of our cavalry. Utilizes a lot of flashbacks in its storytelling. This is a courtroom drama, how this is structured. The screenplay was written first, and then they made a novel off of that. This was shot in many places in Monument Valley, and this failed commercially, but did really well overseas. I wonder why that is in 1960s America, where, we weren't racist at all. But, there's that. But, Foster, what are your general thoughts on Sergeant Rutledge?
So I haven't watched all the John Ford stuff leading up to this other than the ones I've been on the show for, but yeah, same feeling of like I wasn't expecting this to be one of the better ones. I thought it was really good. And I thought Woody Strode especially was pretty awesome. Um I've seen him in a couple things before just looking at his page. I remember him from Spartacus. I can picture his character now that I know who he is. Um I don't remember him in Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. You haven't gotten to that one yet, have you?
That's like 2 weeks from now. So I'll be
Okay.
getting there very close.
Yeah, I've seen that. I just have no memory of him in it. But I think a lot of it comes down to him just being such a presence. Like he was really incredible. Also, apparently he was an NFL player, which is crazy. I didn't know this about him.
Which doesn't surprise me because he looks like he's built like a football
Well, he's
player, to
huge,
be
yeah.
honest.
And he's like that like have him take his shirt off and he's like completely shredded. I was like, okay.
Because
Um,
I did see him. So at some point, Rowan and I did the professionals for Rowan and the Wasteland, and he was one of the main actors in that. And if I'm not mistaken, he's one of the three hired guns at the beginning of Once Upon a Time in the West that
mm.
are there to take out harmonica, where it's like it looks like we forgot to bring an extra horse, and then Charles Bronson just coldly says, "No, you brought too many." Just like but no, he's been Woody Strode is fantastic in this film, and I don't think he got a chance to act like this a whole lot up to this point because like he has a meaty role. Like he has to like from what I remember of Spartacus, like he didn't really talk. It was much more of like a physical role being one of the gladiators and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But he had to carry a lot of emotion here. He had great physicality. Jeffrey Hunter, um,
Mhm.
I'm starting to I came to this comparison when I was watching this with my wife. I'm like, he reminds me of like James Marsden, where I'm like, I need like a good, pretty vanilla
Mhm.
like actor to plop in, but he's gonna do a good job. I'm getting that vibe from Jeffrey Hunter with the films that I've been seeing them in John Ford films. It does make me sad though. I did not realize that like he died at 42 years old in
Mm.
1969 because he was the star of Star Trek before William Shatner, which is because he was Pike. But then this film has such an interesting balance of there's some really serious stuff in this and also funny. Like
Yeah.
the panel for the court martial and the whole is like,
Oh yeah.
can I get
Water.
some water?
Yeah.
And it's like, no, I want the water. It's like and they're like, oh, he didn't finish it. Start casually drinking. And there's some fun dynamics, but like I was not prepared for where this film went at the very end and what transpired at the climax of this trial. And I'm like, this went dark, this went hard and visceral out of nowhere. I'm like,
I know.
holy crap. I think that was the moment where I'm like, wow, I really appreciate this film a lot because like this went to a place that I did not think a film in 1960 would go.
Hmm.
Like some of the specific dialogue a particular character says about his motivations for something, I'm like, did this movie come out how did this movie get released in
It
1960?
holds up pretty well, way better than you think John Ford's take on racism in the 60s would hold up. It's like surprising.
Well, and even specifically the rape and the
Hmm.
how the when the true rapist is finally revealed and how like blatant he talks about his attraction. I'm like, I did not expect this from a John Ford movie. And like I did not expect this from a movie from 1960.
Yeah.
And it gets violent and very visceral in that moment. But there's also like some of the films that I've watched over the past month or so have been very workmanlike from a
Mm.
filmmaking standpoint, and this is not. There is some inspired choices. Like there's very interesting moments of like in the courtroom where all the light is like shut down around
Oh,
whoever's
that's
being
so cool. Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm like, that's an inspired filmmaking choice. And then, you have those like camera pushes that are like really big in John Ford's best films and how the camera moves. And from a technical standpoint, I'm like, he still got it.
Hmm.
This man's been directing movies for 45 years up to this point, but he still got it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the camera work and the blocking and just everything to do with the visuals is always pretty great in all the John Ford movies I've seen. This is cool, of course, because it's in color and it looks beautiful. Um, there's a couple shots. I'm going to describe it so badly, but it's one of the flashback sequences where um, he sees the woman and they're right outside this like it's not a cabin. It's like a he goes
An
inside.
outpost.
Yeah, the outpost maybe. And he goes inside while we're still following her. She's outside, she's standing like on the porch, and you just see him like traveling through the windows like in the back, and you just like a new window light appears and then Rutledge is doing his thing, and then the light turns off, and then a new window. It's like there's just like such great foreground background stuff going on. The shots are busy but clean. Like it's like just there's so much for your eyes to scan in every frame. Of course, a lot of shots through doorways. It's
Yep.
just a really good looking movie.
Yeah, and there's some really well shot action sequences through some of the flashbacks in terms of like on horseback, especially. There's one
Hmm.
particular sequence where there's a lot of that. And there's a lot of so like I watch this with my wife and her first thing is like of course it's like a white savior kind of story because you have Jeffrey Hunter's character as the lieutenant, but like to be frank, this is from like the 1800s, this
Hmm.
story. There was not going to be another black person that was going to come into the equation and save this man. Like, and I feel like this film deals with those complexities of racial tensions and stuff like that in an interesting way, which is, I don't want to keep coming off sounding so surprised, but I was. I was not expecting this kind of nuance
Yeah.
from John Ford in terms of presenting this because like Jeffrey Hunter's character keeps going at it. And then there's very obvious moments where some of these other characters are seeing things from a very specific perspective and jumping to conclusions strictly because, Braxton Rutledge is a black man. And you have these different interrogations, the cross examinations. The one where it winds up being like the head of the court marshal's wife who gets brought in, which also
Yeah.
has some fun comedy to it. But like,
Yes. Yeah.
you're bringing this like old white lady in here, and she's like, I saw him leaving. And it's just like, but you didn't see him do anything. And thinking about that kind of thing. And I think this does courtroom drama really well too.
Hmm.
And like the whole interrogation and presenting the evidence and ugh, the the prosecution attorney in this situation, such an asshole. And it's like that kind of asshole that you really love to hate in a
Mhm.
movie. Really working well for that. But this, because like I have my big three because you have Stagecoach, Grapes of Wrath, The Searchers. Those are like the big three John Ford films that are also my favorites. This is pretty high up there in that grouping of the ones that are like right under it.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised by this, and it makes me really excited to check out Liberty Balance too, because I've heard so many great things about that.
Yeah. I wonder if that's gonna make it a big four for you. Just
We'll see.
yeah.
And based on what I've heard, which is so interesting because I watched this on Amazon, and then it was gonna auto start Liberty Balance right afterwards. I'm like,
Mhm.
nope, I got 2 more weeks. I'll
Yeah.
get around to this. But I guess Foster, were there anything else that really stood out to you about the film?
I was also going to bring up that it's a really good courtroom drama, which I don't think I didn't realize that it was a courtroom drama going into it. I expected more Western and less courtroom drama, but I'm
Yeah.
really not complaining because I probably like courtroom dramas a little bit more. How many courtroom dramas has he done? I know Young Mr. Lincoln, that's one I've seen. Um, are there more?
Maybe like a couple and like a debatable because like he's made some like political films, but like
Hmm.
nothing like I feel like there is one other one distinctly that was a courtroom drama, and I'm trying to remember, but like not many, because
Yeah.
most of them are indeed war films or they are westerns. And
Yeah.
this did a great job of combining genres and really working that because some of those flashback sequences are some great western set pieces and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And but no, the meat of this is the courtroom drama. And one of the most challenging things about a courtroom drama is trying to make it cinematic. And John Ford found really interesting ways to make this feel like you're being brought into this. So definitely a lot of kudos to him, especially at the point where like for all intents and purposes, like he had one film released posthumously in the mid 70s, but like his directing career was over within a couple years of this. So
Hmm.
like he's almost at the end and he's still putting out some really awesome films, which is really impressive for somebody who actually made 140 films.
Yeah.
Wild.
Yeah. And nice for you that you have a couple good ones to end the trek with.
Absolutely. You ready for some recommendations, Foster?
I am.
So what would you like to recommend to our wonderful audience?
Yes, I want to recommend a Sidney Lumet movie called Running on Empty. This is from 1988 and it has River Phoenix along with some other people like Martha Plimpton, Christine Lottie, who's really good in it, and Judd Hirsch. So the basic premise is that this family, their two parents, Christine Lottie and Judd Hirsch, are on the run. They participated in some they're like a progressive family and they got involved in some crime that they didn't intend to go as far as it did, and so now they're on the run and they've raised their kids to be on the run with them. So River Phoenix um has never known any other life other than being on the run, where every 5, 6 months or so they change towns, change schools, they have to change names and identities. So for River Phoenix, who's basically our main character, he doesn't realize how much it's affected him because he's known nothing else his whole life. But at one specific town, he meets Martha Plimpton and he starts to form a connection with her. Understandable. And he is finding himself really sad about the prospect of leaving this place that he really likes. Not only Martha Plimpton, but he's making connections with some of his teachers at this new school who like recognize his music talent. Actually, he plays the piano in this. And so then the climax of the movie is, he's gonna have to move. But at the same time, he doesn't want to move, and I don't want to spoil what happens, but it is really, really good. It is the best River Phoenix performance I've ever seen. It is one of this sounds hyperbolic. It is one of my favorite performances ever that I've seen. Him in the last 5 minutes of this movie made me start crying. I mean, it's Sidney Lumet, so it's the movie's incredible. Um, everyone is really good in it. Martha Plimpton and Judd Hirsch. Christine Lottie is probably the next best after River Phoenix. It's thought-provoking. It makes you think about like your childhood. And the sort of takeaway message is like how parents try and create this world for their kids and they're doing their best, but sometimes they don't realize like the effect that their parenting might have on the kids. And so it's like from River Phoenix's perspective, like half resenting his parents, but half understanding like why they did
Yeah.
what they did. It's so moving. It's so complex and rich and interesting. I loved this movie. It's like a new favorite for me. I watched it a couple weeks ago and I've been thinking about it like every day since.
Well, and Sidney Lumet came so close to winning my most recent director's tournament, going to the finals, and I
Yeah,
could have had you on for that episode. So if he winds up being on in the future, I'd definitely like to have you come on and talk about it.
of course.
But I'm pretty sure it's on my watch list because I put all of Sidney Lumet's films on my watch list. So, but River Phoenix is such a tragic story
Yeah.
because he was a really talented young actor.
Yeah.
And like just imagining like what he could have done
Hmm.
and with his career. And like obviously his brother has become one of the biggest uh actors working today in terms of film with Joaquin Phoenix. It's a shame what we could have seen. And like you had me at Judd Hirsch when you were like Judd Hirsch is in this film. I'm like, what? So it's given off some like Mosquito Coast kind of vibes in terms of like
Hmm.
family on the run. I don't I don't imagine it's like the same kind of like thriller kind of thing, but at
Yeah, more
least
emotional. But yeah.
yeah. But I have two recommendations. One is a new film, which Anora automatically like jumped way towards the top of my favorite films this year. Keep an eye out for the Real Mental podcast where I got to go on with Dr. Marcia to talk about this in depth. There is so many layers to that film, and it's so rich. Um, Mikey Madsen is going to be hopefully getting a bunch of awards attention because she's incredible. And it feels so authentic. All those characters feel so real. And the whole cast is fantastic. A lot more like After Hours than Pretty Woman, that it tricks you into thinking that it's going to be like. And the ending, like the last scene of that film, just like hits you on a deeply emotional level. And it does never felt like 2 hours, 19 minutes for me. It was a wild, thrilling ride. Sean Baker, I think, finally might get over that hump of being like this beloved indie director and might actually get some real attention. It did
Mhm.
win the Palme d'Or, but so did Titan. And I don't think the Oscars were going to be offering up awards to that one. So, like, hopefully, I'm really hoping to see that this gets some awards attention this year. So, we shall see. Foster, did you see Anora?
I did see Anora. I'm gonna not so humble brag. I got to see a Q&A too with Sean Baker and Mikey Madison. It was pretty cool. And she's really different than she is in the movie, which was wild. Um,
Well, because have you seen her? Well, I know she was in Scream
yeah,
5,
yes.
and
And Once
because,
Upon
like,
a Time in Hollywood.
oh yeah, she is so convincing in Anora. Like,
Yeah,
if I didn't know who she was, I wouldn't be shocked if somebody told me all of the performances were like real people,
yeah.
that weren't actors in that because they felt so authentic. My other recommendation is one of my films that I've rewatched, and this will be coming out for a new episode of the Wasteland Vintage Roadshow, is Unforgiven
Mm.
by Clint Eastwood, which I rewatched the other night. Every time I watch this movie, it just surprises me with how much depth that this film has and what it does to the Western genre in general. Because like you alluded to, like you're probably not the biggest fan of Westerns, and like, but like, which there's not a whole lot of people nowadays that are huge Western fans. I am a huge fan of Westerns, and this film literally changed things back in 92 because it completely deconstructed the Western myth of everything and really took Westerns to task in terms of how unrealistic and like fantastical they had become. Because like most Westerns in the 80s are very pulpy, like fun things like Young Guns And but this film is so sobering in terms of how it presents the West. And Clint Eastwood won best was the lone producer to on this film and got the best picture Oscar. He won best director and lost to Al Pacino for Scent of a Woman. Which it is what it is at this point, but Clint Eastwood probably be my second favorite performance of his career, probably behind Million Dollar Baby. I think he's absolutely incredible in that. But what this film does, deconstructing the myth of the West and really being like, this is what the West was really like. It was awkward. It was clumsy. Like you see in Westerns, like especially spaghetti Westerns, people fanning weapons like that. You would have broke your gun in like 2 seconds. But this has one of my favorite scenes in the history of cinema, and that is what I would like to call money rides, because it's when you see Will Money for who he really is for the first time in this movie, and it's absolutely terrifying. The climax of this movie, there's great dialogue. There's two particular lines in this movie that get me every time. It's just like, it's a strange thing killing a man. You take everything that he has and everything that he's ever gonna have. And it's just like, if you really think about that, that's a lot of weight in terms of what you're doing in terms of one particular decision that you make. And then where it's like Dean Hackman towards the end, he's just like, I, I didn't deserve this. I was building a house. And just the way Clint Eastwood coldly says, deserves got nothing to do with it. And it's just like, damn. It's just this film is incredible and has an amazing cast between Morgan Freeman and Dean Hackman, who won an Oscar for this, and even like Richard Harris's English Bob, who just pops up in it as
Mhm.
well. But yeah, fantastic film, one of my favorites, which is why it's on that podcast.
Yeah,
Foster, have you seen Unforgiven?
I have. I was thinking I gotta rewatch it. It's been like 5+ years since I saw it, but it's really good. I say I'm not like a huge Western fan, but there's so many good ones that it's not like I'm not a fan. It's just
Well, it's because I think it might be like the same way. I'm like, I'm not a horror movie fan,
Mhm.
but some of my favorite films are horror movies because there are
There we
some
go. Yeah.
horror films. But like, if I'm gonna have a choice, I'm not gonna casually just throw on a horror movie for the sake of putting on a horror movie.
Yeah.
I might put on a western though, and that I think that's the difference. And
Yeah.
yeah, and we're both people that watch a lot of movies and a lot of different kinds of movies, and it's important to appreciate the wide range of different kind of genres out there. But
Yeah.
Foster, thank you so much for coming on, and also in particular going on this journey of John Ford with me.
Thank you for bringing me on. And as always, this has been a long ride. It's been like a year of my life that I've spent with these John Ford movies.
Oh,
You the full year actually.
I know the feeling, Foster. But yes, as we ride off into the sunset on our journey of John Ford, I'm going to make a huge deal about this when I'm recording with Adam for Chesty, a tribute to a legend, the last documentary that they released of his. And I'm going to be like, this is it. It's been a long journey. And now I can get quirky and weird as I look at my three Wes Anderson posters up on my wall because so excited for that. But thank all of you out there for always tuning in and supporting your Wasteland reviewer.